Put another log on the old fire. There we go. Nice roaring fire. Another year passed. Christmas is almost upon us, and that means that we're pretty much halfway through the winter. In fact, we're over halfway through the winter. Just think, from this point on, the days are getting longer. Before we know it, spring is going to be upon us. If you think about it, probably got about 8-10 weeks. Snowdrops will be up, daffs will be in bloom, primroses will be sprouting. And when you think of winter like that, it ain't so bad. Now, as with a lot of these sort of more lengthy campaigns, there's a lot goes on, you know, so I'm never going to be able to get it all in. But I could never miss out that first year without mention of the Burghfield Lodge, the old Burghfield Sailing Club. And I had a right result there. There was 3 of us that were given keys. It was C-Mex Angling at the time, and old Barney was running it. Good old Barney. He gave me, Nige and Al Welsh, we all got a set of keys each to the old sailing club. And in this sailing club, it was pretty much a home from home. Like, you know, we used to treat it like a second house. And we had showers, cooker, microwave, kettle, fridge, you know, so you could always keep your grub fresh, a big chest freezer for storing bait. And this place, it was like glass fronted, all glass fronted, big glass doors. And you had the most magnificent view right across Burghfield between the 2 biggest islands. We were so lucky looking back. And the good thing about it was it gave us somewhere to store stuff, you know, not only your grub and bits and bobs of tackle and what have you, but soon after starting fishing there, on a friend's advice, Nigel's advice, I bought myself a mountain bike, a nice new shiny one. So the lodge gave me somewhere to lock it up and leave it while I was away, you know. But the difference that mountain bike made, if you imagine Burghfield, it's 96 acres in size. It's a huge, great pit, right, you know, and it's well split up as well. You've got islands, bays, spits, snaggy channels, you know, you name it, it's got it. But and if you was to walk around that, I doubt if there's many that would walk its perimeter more than once in a day, you know, especially in proper hot, sweaty, sunny spotting conditions, do you know what I mean? But the bike meant that there was nowhere that was more than 10 minutes away. So that lodge made a big difference. Now, before I go any further, I think I'd best sort of give you an idea of the sort of challenge that Burghfield was, or at least catching that common was. And I think the best way of doing that is to go through some of its earliest captures. The first capture that I know about it, or the first 100% capture, was a chap called Piers who had it in the late 90s, sort of mid to late 90s, and it was 39 pounds. It then went a couple more years without getting caught, and then, if I remember rightly, Piers' mate Danny caught it at a Weedy Bay, quite significant that, I'll come back to that later. But he had it at a Weedy Bay, and it was 42 pounds, and I still remember the shot now, because I cut it out. It was now in Angling Times, when Angling Times was an old paper, rather than a magazine. It was a big double-page paper, you know. I remember chopping it out, and it was a really inspiring shot, like, you know, a returner. It just had the sun shining on it. It was golden, just incredible. It might have done a very early capture. There was a chap called Roy Weald, who'd caught a 27-pound common way back. But for certain, the first capture was Piers, and second capture was his mate Danny. Trying to think then, that would have been late 90s. Then a chap called Malcolm caught it in 2001. And I remember that shot as well. In fact, I've still got the old RMC guidebook, and it appeared in there. There you go, old Malcolm with it at 45 pounds 12 ounces. And I always remember when I see it is there. It looked really long and lean in that shot. And I wouldn't mind betting that fish had probably been bigger in the not too distant past, you know. At the time, that fish done so few captures, it was always hard to sort of gain an idea of growth, you know, what it was doing. You know, it could go a couple of years between captures. You were never really sure whether there was any fluctuation or whether it just crept up a little bit each year, you know, whether it was a male. We found out in the years to come. So yeah, Malcolm caught it next, 2001, and then there was a really long gap, 4 or 5 years, and then my good mate Nige caught it in 2006, Maytime, off the shallows, at 52 pounds, and that was like a seriously well-deserved capture. Something that always sticks in mind from Nigel's story is when he described all the kit that he'd gone through, and it was something like, you know, 200 gas bottles, 3 pairs of walking boots, 2 mountain bikes, like, no, it was a big long list, just mega. But yeah, seriously well-deserved capture. Like I say, that was 2006. Then there was another 2-year gap, and then a chap called Darren caught it, Darren Day, and he caught it out of the dogleg, which is joined onto Weedy Bay. And I don't know if I said, but Malcolm's capture was also in the dogleg. So out of its first 5 captures, 3 of them were out of that Weedy Bay dogleg area. So it was already a pattern was starting to form, you know. But that last capture, when Darren caught it, it was absolutely massive. By now, it was definitely the biggest common carp in the country, and it was 57 pounds. That's when I became interested, or really, really interested, you know. Nigel had already caught it a year or 2 previous, so really all I'd been doing in the meantime was making excuses, do you know what I mean? Because it was one of them. That's what I say when I mean doubt, like, you know. I tell you something, I've got all the time in the world, you know, or if I really want to, I can make the time. Like, you know, if I want to take on a challenge, I can make the time. But anyone who takes on that challenge, fishing for that Burghfield Common, while holding down a 9 till 5 job, they deserve the total respect and admiration, I'm telling you that. I know a lot of proper hardcore big fish anglers with lots of time on their hands, and they'll still steer clear of Burghfield because they know, you know, it's one of them that, you know, I thought about it long and hard before eventually deciding to fish for it, you know. It's like, is life too short? Do you know what I mean? Because like with that one, it might well be. The thing is though, with, you know, the biggest challenges, you know what they say, you know, the bigger the challenge, then the better the prize. And to a big carp angler, you know, someone who's really into it, it's what they love, then that Burghfield, just the fact that it existed, do you know what I mean? It was there, and to me it was like dangling a lively gudgeon in front of a hungry big old perch, do you know what I mean? I had to have a go. So it had a reputation, rock. I was only too aware of that, you know, because I'd kept in touch with my mate Nige throughout. You know, his campaign was 4 or 5 years. I've got other close friends as well, Al Welsh, and others that I knew of as well that had really fished hard, you know, really put in the work, baiting, working areas, and several times over the years, you know, with both Nige and Al Welsh in particular, I can remember them having like real purple patches, if you like, you know, where they were working a swim and they were really having it off, you know, 30, 40 fish hits, you know, and then amongst those would be a lot of the known fish, like, you know, your classic carp, double belly, 3 up, 5 down, you know, a lot of the older fish, but no burr common, like, you know, and that was always on my mind when I started there. You know, I think I said earlier on, you know, a lot of big fish, you know, it's just a case of working your way through them. Once you can catch 1 or 2 of the better ones, you know, all you got to do is just keep at it and you work your way through them, and eventually the one that you want most comes along. But that wasn't my experience with Burghfield, and it certainly wasn't the experience of 2 or 3 of my friends either. You know, it just seemed that, I'll tell you another way I could put it. There were swims on that lake, well-known sort of individual popular swims that were fished relentlessly over the years, and if you added up all the captures, because Burghfield has been fished for carp for many years, but if you added up all the captures out of some of those swims, some of those swims would have done in excess of 200 carp. They'd never ever produced the big common, like, you know, so it was one of them. It obviously had its areas, it didn't get caught nowhere near the rest of the fish in the lake, but even then, that first year, the way I went about it, I just thought it's a nice new challenge, there's loads of nice carp in here, I'm just going to fish, enjoy myself, and if it comes along, it comes along. It wasn't until I'd been there for a few months that I had to change my approach. But that first year, it was all about, like I said, I had the lodge, and I had my push bike, so that was handy. I could cycle round and round, and the first 2 months that I was there, I started in July of 2008, and the first 2 months that I was there, it was all about the edges. Like, you know, I'd cycle round, bait up half a dozen spots in the edge, go back to the lodge, cup of tea, something a week, then go for another cycle. You know, like, I was there a lot. But yeah, it was a good first summer. I think I finished the summer with about 20 odd fish. But there was one area, I've already mentioned the one sailing club, but further down that same bank, Seals Farm Lane, further down that bank you had another sailing club. And it was that was another derelict one. It was also CMEX angling owned. And fishing off of the front of that, the first sailing club wasn't much good for fishing, but that second sailing club, off a little grassy front to it, was a really good area. And basically, if you imagine you had lots of open water, big island to the left at Mega Range, another island off to the right, but the bank sort of curled round and stopped just short of this island to the right. This was Sills Farm here. It stopped just short of the island, and there was a channel, and it was a channel between the island and Sills Farm that the fish used to use an awful lot. The open water was all good as well, but how it turned out, I remember I dropped in there for a couple of nights through the summer, caught one each time I dropped in there. The edge spots were still happening around the lake at that point, but when it got to September, all those edge spots died a death, and the only swim that was still happening for me was that second sailing club. Now, I remember I got things rocking, like, you know, it was only a sort of 40, 50 yard chuck to the island, and I could put 2 rods in off of the front of the sailing club on the green there. I could cast 2 rods to the side of the island perfectly, and I'd been concentrating on it for a little while, and then the next thing, health and safety come down. And unluckily there was asbestos on the roof of the sailing club, and long story short, I lost my permission to fish off the front. Typical health and safety. But good old Barney, he arranged to meet me there, and he came down, and on the same land of the sailing club, but well away from the buildings, he allowed me to build another swim. Now, it was an old slipway, took loads of clearing. I remember I rang Nige. Nige came down and helped me clear it that same day. But from there, the angle was, it was a lot further. Instead of a 50 yard chuck to the island, it was now a 160 yard tow. Up until that point, I'd not used a remote boat at all. But from that position, that was the only way I was going to be able to do it, was tow them out with a remote boat. And the other good thing with it was that instead of 2 rods, because of the change of angle, I could now get 3 rods in all alongside this island. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be able to go through it all. I'd love to, like, you know, it'll just go on and on forever. But it turned out to be a really, really good autumn. Lots of baiting, lots and lots of fishing, but by the time that November had come round, I finished off that year with 74 Burghfield carp. Most of the known residents, you know, your classic carp, 3 up, 5 down, double belly. There were several older ones, I forget the name of them now. The kinky back, that was another one of the old leanies, and others, and a lot of the bigger, there was a lot of younger strain fishing there at that time that were coming through. Now they're massive, there's a lot of bingers in there, the common's not the only big one in that lake. But at the time they were still on the way up. I caught lots of 30s, and there was 2 40-pounders. I had one a 40-pound 8 and another a real giant, the biggest mirror in there at the time, and it was 45-12. So a great first year, but no big burr common, you know. Basically I'd pretty much repeated what friends had done in the past, you know. Other friends had done exactly the same thing. They'd worked their way all the way through them but not caught that common. Now I had a winter to think about it. Another log on the old fire. So yeah, like I say, it had a reputation. It was an hard one, you know, almost mythical, rarely seen, let alone caught. That first year, I didn't start until July, but that first year I'd seen it twice. Both times it was under the same bush in the back of Weedy Bay. And like I say, out of those 5 captures, only ever been caught 5 times, out of those 5 captures, 3 of them have been from that area. So, and you've got to think, you know, all of the other known residents I'd pretty much caught, you know, all of the ones that I really wanted to catch. It had narrowed right down to the common. That was the one. So it was now a bit of tunnel vision, if you like, you know. It was all about the common. Now, that Weedy Bay area is a completely different area to the rest of the lake. You know, if you added up, you know, all the carp that get caught there each year, I doubt if there's more than half a dozen captures a year. 10 at absolute most, and, you know, and that's on a good year. You know, I think it was a bit more stagnant compared to the rest of the lake. It was a bit more sheltered, didn't get as much wind on it. But even so, when you pieced it together, you know, that common obviously liked it there. And the more I thought about it, especially as I'd seen it there twice myself the previous year, August and September time were my 2 sightings. You know, it's a shame, like that time of the year, at September I knew that time was running out, you know, it was in shallow water underneath a bush, and from that point on they all hit the open water, which is where I went on to have a good hits through the autumn months. But that fish, it clearly liked that part of the lake, whatever way you want to look at it, and there was a lot of sightings there as well. You know, it got seen around there quite a bit. I reckon if I'd gone back sort of five years or so, I reckon it would have used that area a lot more. I think it was only the fact that it had been caught 3 times from there that it was a bit shy about it. Basically, conditions had to be absolutely bang on for it to get in there. But it was an area I was keeping an eye on all the time, and I had little spots baited around there as well. Now, the way I looked at it, I tell you how I looked at it. I thought about it. See, but Burghfield wasn't that difficult a place to catch carp from. You could catch carp from there, all right. Whereas you compare it to other places, say somewhere like the Yateley Carp Lay, for instance, like, you know, you could go all year on somewhere like that for just 3 or 4 bites. So the way I started looking at it, I thought, well, if I fish that weedy bay and just concentrate on that weedy bay dogleg area, if I can catch half a dozen carp from that area, maybe 10 at most, then there's every chance of that big common being amongst them. Basically, it was a way of narrowing the odds. You know, it wasn't a part of the lake that you get many carp from, but I knew if I could catch half a dozen, maybe 10 from there, there was every chance of that big common being amongst them. You're starting to get it now, I reckon. I've done a lot more looking that spring and summer, but that part of the lake, Weedy Bay and the Dogleg, it was always devoid. Like, you know, you wouldn't see nothing around there at all. And the crater underneath the bush, where I'd seen that big common the year before twice, August and September, I remember it even had a layer of leaves settled in the bottom of it. You know, it just the area wasn't being used at all. And then one day the leaves were gone. Like, you know, that was sort of mid-June sort of time. And then a couple of days later I saw 2 under there, a common around the 30-pound mark and an upper double mirror. And I remember I dropped in. You could fish to that bush from the other side of Weedy Bay, tuck one up tight to it, and I dropped in, got everything exactly how I wanted it. I fished tigers and I caught 2. Well, the 2 that I'd seen. I had an upper double mirror and a 30-pound common. I always remember I'd done self-takes. The little one I just put back, but the 30-pound common I'd done self-takes, and they weren't too good, so you'll have to excuse the quality of that one. I remember I did catch one more on the following trip, and again, I'd seen it underneath the bush. And I remember at that point, I started to think, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, you know, hardly any carp were using that area, and the last thing I wanted to be doing was catching all the decoys, if you like, you know. So I decided at that point I was just going to bait, keep a little bit of bait trickling in there, but I wasn't going to fish until I'd seen the common. Now, wind forward the clock a few days, June the 30th, and it was sweltering hot. We had 3 or 4 days hot weather forecast on the bounce. And I started off the day as usual. I went for an early morning cycle. I checked out all the usual spots, no fish on show, nothing about. But there was one bit where I was fishing in Weedy Bay. I'll tell you what I want to do really, I want to show you a map. Let me get the map. This is Nigel's map. He had it printed for his book. But Cliff at Empress, our book publisher, he printed both of our books for us and he'd done us one each and got it framed. But it gives you a rough idea of what I'm talking about. You can see just how split up in nature the lake is. But I was fishing, where are we? There's Weedy Bay. And I fished from here, tucking one across to, no it wasn't, it was from here, tucking one across to there. It's so split up, even I'm lost. I was fishing from here, tucking one to there. But you see where that other white dot is? Right there in the edge is a completely different swim, and to get to it was a real mission. You had a river running here, the River Kennet. But in front of that swim there, on that cycle round, sweltering hot morning, it was only 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30. But I got round there, and I always remember it was where Darren Day had caught it from the year before. And in the edge there'd been a little spot. There was a branch line across the bottom. The water was quite clear. There was a branch line across the bottom. And I remember a few days earlier I'd seen a little spot, the branch line across it, and it looked like a carp had flanked across the branch, you know, and when they do that they clear a little patch either side, a little bit of fine gravel rubbed down deeper. And this day it looked bigger still, like, you know, instead of so big, it was sort of so big, like, you know, and it just looked so likely as though carp had been there. Anyway, I put a little bit of pellet, half a dozen tigers on it, carried on my cycle. I remember I went to the cafe, sausage, egg, chips and beans. I even remember texting Nigel and Jamie, just energising for a day's searching. I remember it. Where by the time I'd got out of the cafe and got back round to the Dogleg on the riverside of it, it must have been sort of 11 o'clock by now, and it was really, really hot. No fish on show again until I got right to the very, very, very end of the Dogleg. When I say the very end, we can see the size of the lake. I'm talking here, so it's had to go all the way through all of this, and then it was right down the very end. And it was just one fish. Like, I was looking through trees, and there was a layer of scum, like all the fluff off of the willows, you know, covering the surface. And there was just a hump bobbing there, only a small fish. But I remember I was off my bike and I wheeled my bike round to the other side of the bay, hoping I'd get a better look of it. And halfway there, I caught sight of another one. And it was sort of through a gap through foliage. It's hard to explain, but it was a gap through foliage and there was weed beds. It's only a tiny little part of the lake, just a tiny little back bay of a back bay of a back bay, you know? But there was just this little hole in it and there was another one sat there. And I put my bike down on the floor, crept forward, and as I crept forward, sort of the view widened out, and then suddenly there was one to the left. And I don't know, it probably took me about 2 seconds to realise what I was looking at, you know? 10 months had passed since I'd last seen that big common, but it took me 2 seconds to realise what I was looking at, you know? There was nothing else in the lake that could be as wide as that. I got up, I left my bike on the floor, got up a tree. I spent a few minutes watching him. It was just so exciting all that time, you know, like you felt privileged just to see the thing. But there it was, like, you know, and I remember as I was watching it, it came out of the hole in the weed and went right and disappeared from view. There was a lot of overhanging trees on that side. And I got down from the tree, followed, and I'm trying to look through all the overhanging trees. I remember just looking through a gap and I caught sight of the back end of it, like a big sweeping tail as he was going left back towards where I'd earlier been watching him. I went back, watched him for a couple more minutes. I watched him settle up in the hole, and at that point I started to get a little bit twitchy. You know, I thought, oh, if someone else walks around, like it was so blatant, if anyone walked around who was looking, they'd see it, you know, but me standing there watching was kind of even more blatant still. Do you know what I mean? So I just wanted to get out of there. So I cycled back to the lodge. I took quite a slow cycle back. You know, you'd think I'd be in a hurry, but I'll be honest with you, I was a bit torn. You know, I was in two minds as what to swim to fish from. The most likely spot was where I'd been priming in Weedy Bay. Like, you know, I'd already caught 3 fish off it. I knew the spots. I knew I could land them from there. It was perfect. But that other spot, which you know, it was only sort of 10 yards away from it, a much further distance the actual swim to get to, but the spots in relation to each other, they were probably 10 yards apart. And I couldn't make my mind up, like, you know, that new spot on the riverside just looked fed on to me, like it looked brushed on, you know, as though it had been flanked across. And then having seen the common later in the day, right down the end of the dogleg, it sort of made sense to me that was the place to fish. Now, I've got to say, both of those spots were at least 150 yards away from where I'd just seen the common. Like, you know, many times I'd run it over and over in my head. Because what I would do if I was to see that common down the end of the dogleg, because it was a known spot. Like, you know, I'd heard of several sightings over the years, especially sort of April, May, June, July time, you know, through the warmer weather, where it really liked it down that end of the lake. But it'd never ever been caught right in the very end of the dogleg. I think it wasn't a feeding area at all. It was somewhere where they just went to sun themselves. You know, it was a little bit stagnant. So I'd already made my mind up. If I was to see it there, I was going to fish either Weedy Bay. And now this new spot turned up and I'm sort of torn and I'm cycling back to the lodge and I'm thinking, which swim am I going to fish with? You know, this is a once in a year chance, really. You know, I'd only seen it twice the previous year. So I got back to the lodge. I already had a packed lunch waiting in the fridge for me. Car was loaded as well. Set off, and I remember I didn't park up in the usual place in the car park. I parked up off site because I didn't even want anybody to know that I was round there. Those captures in Weedy Bay I'd kept to myself as well. You know, you had to. It was one of those areas that other people were looking. They expected the big common to turn up there at some point in the summer. So I'd made my mind up by now. I thought, right, I'm going to go for it on that river, on the dogleg spot on the riverbank, which was one rod, you know, nice and easy, just lowering off the tip, which I think was another attraction. And I got my barrow around there. It was all high foliage, stinging nettles and that, really overgrown, a lot of hawthorn at the water's edge. Really tight swim. You know, you've got a little dot island here, little dot island there, all snags, ever so tight really for fishing for a fish of that size. But Darren had managed to land it from there the previous year, so I thought it's got to be worth a try. Now, as I walked in, you sort of walk down the bank, and there was a line of hawthorns, and then the little spot that I'd been putting bait on that was cleaned off, where you had the branch line across it, the flanking spot, if you like. That was just off to the right, but to the left here you had a dot island and a big set of pads, and all the scum had collected in there. And I remember as I carried my kit through, a little hole opened out in amongst the scum, and I stopped and looked, and I saw the back end of the common go through it. Now I'll tell you what, from the time that I'd seen that common right down the end of the dogleg, the time that it had taken me to cycle back, and then drive back round and barrow around with my kit. Couldn't have been more than a half hour, but that common had already travelled 150 yards and was there where in my chosen spot for the night, you know. It didn't take it long to... I wouldn't mind betting it had already fed on the spot before I'd seen it down the end earlier that day. As I got the very last of my kit in, and then I actually checked the spot where I'd been sprinkling a little bit of bait, there was scum, you know, all over the surface, you know, but there was a frothy patch of bubbles and the scum had sort of trapped it, and it was directly over the spot, and they were still acting, you know, and they're still popping. Like, you know, I remember only a minute earlier I've seen the common swimming away from that area, you know, so I wouldn't mind, I'm pretty sure he'd probably fed there in the morning, and then again just before I'd got my kit into the swim. Anyway, I got everything. I'd actually hid behind all of the hawthorn trees at first. I didn't set up directly in the swim. I just got a few bits off the barrow, and I got a rod ready. Lowered in. I could see actually as I lowered in there was no bait left on the spot. I'd not been putting a lot there anyway, but there was nothing left on the spot. And I lowered just one side of the little stick, right on the little bit that was all lovely and clean. Lowered it in, chewed up a couple of tigers like I always do, and put them around it. And just as I'm sitting back, oh, that fire's getting lively, isn't it? Just as I'm sitting back, I remember you got a little bit of reed at the swim's front. The spot was there, like right in front of me. And just as I'm sitting back and setting the rod on the rest, suddenly I caught sight of two coming from the right, two mirrors. And they came in, dropped down to spot, and I like cringed, oh my God. And it literally went as I've still got my hand over the rod, it's tightened up in my hand. Big explosive battle, like, you know, the last thing I really needed at that point, being honest, was to catch one and spook the common, you know. But I got that first one. It was a 25.5 pounder, a linear. Well, linear one side and completely bald the other, quite unusual, but a good start. Like I said earlier, you know, half a dozen carp from that part of the lake, you know, and then there'd be every chance of catching the common. That was my fourth. I'd already caught 3 from Weedy Bay. I got the rod back in again, praying, fingers crossed that I hadn't spooked the common. I hadn't seen it after that, you know. It got dark, still no more sightings of it. And the next thing, I woke up early hours in the morning, a few more bleeps, another fish on, another lively battle, big explosive one under the tip. That one was a 24 pounder, 24 pound common. I slipped that one back without a picture, but not there. I remember carrying it all the way around to the back of Weedy Bay and returning it in there. I was really was scared. I really didn't want to blow this chance, you know. It's once in a year chance. It went quiet that day. I remember getting up in the morning. The daytime, you know, although I'd caught that 25 pounder when I'd first got into the swim the day before, the following day it was very, very quiet, and I didn't even leave the rod out all day. I reeled it in so that I could have a walk around the bay. I was hoping to see the common down the end of the dogleg, but I saw nothing. I saw no carp at all. In fact, it seems mad looking back, you know, to have caught 2 carp from that area, but I moved. Like, you know, the very next night. I thought to myself, it's got to have gone, it's gone. And I was sort of wanting to get ahead of it. So I moved to the next bay in the chain, which was Goose Bay. You had Dogleg, Weedy Bay, and then Goose Bay. And I had a spot going in Goose Bay, which I'd been catching fish from only a week or 2 prior to that. I'd caught a couple from it. So I made the decision to move, and I even caught one that night, you know, right out the edge in Goose Bay, I had a 20 pound mirror. But I remember when I got up in the morning, you know, when you're kicking yourself, you know, I thought, what have I done? I'm done. You know, it feels colder rather than warmer. Do you know what I mean? I felt that I'd moved away from it. So early in the morning, I packed everything up again, pushed my kit all the way back round to the riverside of the Dogleg Bay. Didn't put the rod out straight away, and I looked around all day. Didn't see nothing. Another quiet day, another quiet night as well. I fished that spot that night, nothing. And in the morning, well, it's light at that time of the year. By now, we're into July, and it was getting light at, what, 4:30, you know, 5 o'clock in the morning. And by sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock, you know, I've been up for 3 hours, like, you know, I've not seen a thing. And it's clear as well, you know, I'm looking at my bait in the edge, you know, and when it's like that, it's very easy to get twitchy and think it's time to move again, you know. And that's what I started to do. I started to pack everything up. And I was so lucky when I look back at it. But I got everything packed up, and I just unshipping the rod together to put, that was the last thing to go on the barrow. And I'm round the side of this little bank of hawthorns, you know, and the spot's there just out of sight. And just as I'm putting the rod in the barrow, one jumped out, like a clattery thing. And I look round the side of the hawthorns, and I can actually see, it was only a mid-double, like a little common, but it was feeding directly on the spot. As I was watching it, another one came in and joined it. It was like a mid-20, a pale coloured mirror. But, you know, 5 minutes earlier, five minutes earlier, I would have had a bite. like, you know what I mean? Because that rig would have still been on the spot. But then again, if it was 5 minutes later, I would have been out of there moving. Do you know what I mean? So I was so lucky. Anyway, I didn't get the rod back in straight away. Those fish only hanged around for 10 minutes or so. There wasn't enough bait to hold them. You know, they soon done the off. And as just as the last couple of days, I spent my time walking around the bay, like, you know, looking all the way around the dogleg. But if anything, it was quieter still. You know, other than that little sign in the morning, the rest of the day was so quiet. There had been tench spawning in the dogleg up until then, and even those had gone quiet, you know. And I started to worry. I started to think, oh my God, you know. Anyway, that night I went through the same procedure as usual. I left it until about 7 o'clock before lowering the rig in. There was no point in putting it in before then. You can see there was nothing there. And I got the rig in place, little bit of chopped tiger around it again, a couple of whole ones. Kept my kit well back hidden because it was so close in and you were blatant there, you know. And even when it got dark, I remember I carried my bed through and put it well back from the, I only had the one rod out, and I put it well back from the rod. And it wasn't until I went to sleep or just before I went to bed, probably about midnight, that I carried the bed forward that little bit. You know, you just shuffle it forward. You know, I didn't want to be making tea or nothing right next to the rod, but at the same time it was quite a snaggy area. So when it came to going to bed, I wanted to be right up close to it. I wanted to be on that rod as quick as possible. Because like I said, you had a lot of, mainly it was to the right, you had a big snaggy channel. Anyway, I've gone to sleep. It's really hot, sticky, sweltering night. And the mozzies were bad, I remember that. Dozed off, probably about midnight or something. And I've woke up. The first thing I woke up to was just a few bleeps. I don't know how long I'd been asleep. It was probably sort of 2, 3 o'clock in the morning by now. But I've woke up to a few bleeps. And I've got a tight clutch, you know. But I was still expecting something a bit more positive than that. Both of the 20 pounds I'd caught had been animal, do you know what I mean? But just like, and it stopped. And I walked up to the rod, felt the line, and it's tight, you know. I picked up the rod, and just to the left was this little clump of pads. I don't know, it was probably 10 to 20 leaves, that's all, just a tiny little clump of pads. And as I've picked up the rod, the line's gone left, and there's lots of boiling and swirling in amongst the pads. Like, you know, definitely a carp. I knew it had to be a carp anyway, I was fishing tigers, you know, but it didn't feel that big at first. And it's really dark as well in this area, you know, it's all enclosed, all islands and that. And I doubt if I had it on for a minute or so before I could see. I was basically preparing the net within a minute of hooking it, of picking up the rod, and I could just about make out a head. Pretty much, I thought it was beaten. Didn't think it was a big fish. So I've got the net under it, gone to lift, and basically it basically shot out. There's a big explosion of water, and it shot out further into this little sort of opening between the islands, all explosive battle and that. So I'd hit it with the cord. You know, it was obviously a little bit bigger than what I thought. And as time went on, over the next sort of 2, 3 minutes, you know, it's starting to go through your head to think, whoa, hang on a minute, this is feeling, it felt heavier and bigger and you know, more and more powerful. So explosive as well, you know, it was echoing. That's what I remember, the echoes of its tail every time it was exploding on the surface. You know, I've got it close to the net. This time around, I've got the net deeper. Got it in, another big explosion, but this time it's in the net. And you know what it's like, you pause, don't you? You know, for that little second, you get your head together. It's like, please. And I clicked the old torch on, and there it was. Like, you know, just this massive, great big, long common, like, you know, no mistaking it whatsoever. But even, and there wasn't many recognisable features on that fish either. All there was on its top lobe of its tail was a couple of tiny little nicks, and I mean tiny. You know, I'd studied shots of it hundreds of times, do you know what I mean? So I knew about those nicks. But I put my hand in, lifted up the tail, shone the torch in it, and there was those 2 little nicks. So I knew for certain what he was, you know. I sacked him up in the net, actually. I left him in the net, unhooked him, and then sacked him inside the net, double whammy style, you know, like I always like to do with a real special one that I definitely can't afford to have jump out. And then I remember it was just starting to get light, and you've got the River Kennet behind you. And the other side of the Kennet was all meadows, and that's where the sun come off, up to the right. I remember walking out there with a cup of tea, sitting on the banks of the Kennet and looking across at the meadow as dawn began to break, you know, and there was all mist rolling off of the meadow, and the sky was all turning pink. It was just incredible, magical, you know. And I sent a text. I texted 3 of my real close mates at the time, and it was Dave Swinchat, Jamie Smith, and Nigel Sharp, obviously. You know, all of them had been in close contact with me throughout that campaign. And I sent them a text, and it was, I think I said something along the lines of, I'm watching dawn break with the finest king carp in all the land in my net. And that's pretty much how I felt, like, you know, it was the best of all, the ultimate challenge, and there he was, I had him. All three of the lads turned up to help out with the pictures and the weighing. Remember, she wasn't quite as big as we were expecting, you know, but at 47.4 she was certainly big enough for me. She'd obviously recently spawned out, but you know what, did I care? Did I heck? It was the Burghfield Common, do you know what I mean? That, and still to this day, that was 2009, so like 9 years on, and it's still the biggest common and the best common I've ever caught. Merry Christmas and have a happy New Year, yeah?